Okay, so we're back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be tackling something that I think a lot of our listeners have experience with.
Right.
And that's learning English as a second language.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're not going to be giving you tips on how to pass the TOEFL exam or, how to conjugate verbs or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
What we're going to be talking about is the impact that speaking English can have on your life.
Right.
In a much broader sense.
Broader. Yeah.
Yeah, like how it can actually change your career trajectory.
Oh, absolutely.
Change your relationships.
Yeah.
Change even your personality in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to be drawing on some really interesting insights that we got from the English Learning Podcast.
Yeah, it was a good one.
It was a really good one.
Yeah, it had some really interesting stuff. So
yeah.
I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion.
Absolutely.
So, when people talk about English being this kind of global language,
right?
What does that really mean to you, in practical terms?
Well, it really hit me recently when I was reading that something like 70% of international business is conducted in English.
Wow.
I mean, that's huge. And it's not just business either,
Right, yeah.
You look at scientific research, the internet,
yeah.
All these massive global networks rely on English as this common language.
Yeah, it's like having, when you travel, you bring those adapters so you can plug in your devices anywhere.
Right.
It's almost like English is the universal adapter for communication.
Exactly. And that's actually something the podcast mentioned. They said it's like a key.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
To unlock a whole new world.
Yeah, whole new world of ideas, experiences, friendships even.
And it's so true because, even on a simple level, when you think about traveling, if you're in a place where you don't speak the local language, just being able to get by in English can make such a difference.
It takes the stress away.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can navigate. You can ask for help. You can actually have conversations with people.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so exciting. You're not just observing a different culture from the outside.
You're a part of it.
Yeah, you're actually engaging with it and the people in it.
Yeah.
Picture this. You're sitting in a cafe in Paris.
Okay.
And there's someone next to you who's clearly struggling to order in French.
Right.
They're getting flustered. The waiter's getting impatient.
Yeah.
If you can step in and help out using English.
Right.
That's a pretty cool feeling, right?
It is. It's like you're using your skills to make a connection.
Exactly. And I think that's where you start to see how speaking English can actually build your confidence.
It's that feeling of capability.
Yeah, you realize, hey, I can handle myself in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just limited to, exotic travel scenarios either.
Right.
Think about your career.
Okay, yeah.
In today's globalized job market, English fluency is often non-negotiable. For so many employers, it's not just a nice to have, it's a must have.
Mm-hmm.
Because you need to be able to communicate with clients, suppliers, colleagues all over the world.
Right. And it's not just about getting the job either.
No.
The podcast we listened to mentioned how English speakers have so many more opportunities for international travel for work.
Oh, yeah. That's a huge draw for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is how English proficiency can impact your career progression.
How so?
If you think about multinational companies in all sorts of industries,
right?
Like marketing, finance, technology.
Mm-hmm.
The people who can communicate effectively in English, they're often the ones who get promoted to leadership positions.
Right.
They're seen as more valuable to the company because they can operate on a global scale.
Makes sense. And I think it goes beyond just the language skills themselves.
Right.
It's the confidence that comes with it.
Absolutely.
How does that play out in your work life, would you say?
Well, think about meetings, for example. If you're confident in your English, you're more likely to speak up, share your ideas, ask questions, challenge assumptions.
Contribute.
Yeah, you're not holding back because you're worried about making a mistake or being misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
And the podcast actually made this really interesting observation. They said that people who improve their English often become more assertive in general.
Really?
Yeah, and they're perceived as more confident and even as leaders.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's like that confidence spills over into other areas of their lives.
So it's not just about the language, it's about who you become because of it.
Exactly. And, we're seeing this huge rise of remote work and the gig economy for freelancers and entrepreneurs, English is essential because the global marketplace is online and it operates primarily in English.
Right. So if you want to work with clients and collaborators from all over the world, you need to be able to communicate with them.
Exactly.
Makes sense. And even if you're not working internationally, even if you're in a company that's very local,
right,
English skills can still be super valuable.
Oh, absolutely.
You might have clients or suppliers who prefer to communicate in English.
And if you can do that smoothly, it builds trust. It strengthens those relationships.
It makes you a more valuable asset to the company no matter what.
Exactly.
So we've talked about the professional benefits, but what about the personal ones?
Yeah.
How has learning English helped you grow as a person?
Yeah.
How has it impacted your confidence outside of work?
You know, I think this is where you really see the transformative power of language learning.
How so?
Because even just stepping outside your comfort zone to try to speak English, even in small interactions, it's a huge confidence booster.
It is. It's like you've conquered a challenge.
Yeah, and you get that little rush of satisfaction when you realize, hey, I just had a whole conversation in another language.
Yeah.
And I think that feeling, especially when you start doing it more and more, it translates into a more general sense of empowerment.
Right.
You know, you start to believe in your ability to learn new things.
To communicate.
To connect with people from different backgrounds.
Yeah. And the podcast used this really great example of connecting with people while traveling.
Oh, yeah.
Like you said earlier, you're not just observing, you're participating.
Yeah.
You're building relationships.
Exactly. And those interactions, they can be so rewarding.
They can be.
Because you're overcoming that language barrier and you're creating a real human connection.
And that confidence, it doesn't just stay in those travel situations, does it?
No, not at all.
Can you give an example of how it might spill over into other areas of your life?
Sure. You know, you might find yourself speaking up more at work.
Okay.
Or in social situations. Maybe you're more willing to take on new challenges. Or just try new things in general.
Right.
It's like that confidence you've built through language learning.
Yeah.
It gives you this sense of, I can do this.
Right. You've proven to yourself that you can learn a difficult skill.
Exactly.
So you're more willing to put yourself out there in other areas of your life.
Yeah, and I think another important aspect of this is self-trust.
How so?
Well, when you learn a new language, you're bound to make mistakes.
Right.
But you learn to accept those mistakes. You learn to see them as part of the process.
Right.
And you keep going.
Yeah.
And that builds this trust in your ability to learn and grow.
You're more resilient.
Exactly. And, you know, on top of all that,
Well,
there are actual cognitive benefits to language learning.
really? Like what?
Well, research suggests that learning a second language can improve your problem-solving skills, your multitasking abilities, even your memory.
Wow.
It's like a workout for your brain.
So you're not just becoming more confident,
Right.
You're actually getting smarter.
Yeah, your brain is becoming more agile, and that can make you feel even more confident.
It's a positive cycle.
Exactly. You know, you can think on your feet, you can handle complex situations.
All right.
And all of that contributes to personal growth.
And I think what's important to remember is that this growth, it doesn't happen overnight.
No, definitely not.
The podcast emphasized that it's a gradual process. You have to be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
You have to celebrate the small victories.
Absolutely.
And every step forward, no matter how small it might seem, is a win.
It is.
Yeah.
It's all progress.
So let's talk about something that I think a lot of English learners struggle with.
Okay.
And that's the fear of actually speaking.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
It's a huge hurdle for so many people.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about speaking that makes people so nervous?
I think it's the fear of making mistakes.
Yeah.
You know, sounding awkward, being misunderstood.
Looking foolish.
Yeah, and it's totally understandable.
Yeah.
You're putting yourself out there.
You're vulnerable.
Exactly. You're opening yourself up to potential judgment. And that can be really scary.
But the podcast we listened to had a really interesting way of reframing this.
Oh, yeah.
They said, instead of seeing mistakes as failures,
Right.
we should see them as feedback.
Yeah.
As valuable information that helps us learn.
Exactly. Every mistake is an opportunity to improve. And it's important to remember that fluency, it doesn't happen overnight.
No, it's a journey.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
That's right.
It takes time and effort and patience.
And you have to be kind to yourself.
Absolutely.
you're not going to be perfect from the start.
No one is.
Nobody is. And that's okay.
Yeah.
The podcast also talked about the importance of creating a safe space to practice.
Right.
Like practicing with a friend or a language partner. Or even just talking to yourself in English.
Yeah, that's a great way to get comfortable.
It lowers the stakes.
Exactly. You can make all the mistakes you want.
Yeah.
Without feeling self-conscious.
And they also made this really reassuring point that most native English speakers, they're actually very understanding.
Oh, yeah.
They appreciate the effort that you're making.
They do.
To try to communicate in their language.
Absolutely. They're more impressed by your willingness to try than they are by your grammar.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we get so caught up in trying to be perfect.
Right.
We forget the point of language.
Which is to communicate.
Exactly. The podcast said it really well.
Yeah.
They said focus on the message you're trying to convey.
Right.
Not on the grammar or the pronunciation.
If the person understands you, that's a success.
Exactly.
And I think that takes a lot of pressure off.
It does. It's so liberating.
Yeah, it allows you to just relax and be yourself. And speaking of relaxing,
the
podcast also talked about how overthinking can really hinder your fluency.
Oh, yeah. You can get stuck in your head.
You can.
Analyzing every word before you say it.
Right.
And that just slows you down.
Yeah.
But the more you practice, the less you overthink.
Right. It's more automatic.
Exactly. And that's when you start to feel really confident.
So the key is to just start speaking.
Yeah.
Embrace the discomfort. And trust that with practice, the fear will fade.
It will.
Okay, so we've talked about why speaking English is so important.
Right.
And how to overcome the fear of speaking. Now let's get practical.
Yeah.
What are some specific tips that our listeners can use to improve their speaking skills?
Well, first and foremost,
Yeah.
practice consistently, even if it's just for a few minutes each day.
Make it a habit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The podcast recommended aiming for at least 15 minutes of focused practice every day.
Okay.
And they had this really cool tip that I love.
What's that?
Talk to yourself in English.
Really?
Yeah, just narrate your day.
Out loud.
Yeah, out loud.
Okay.
Describe what you're doing, what you're thinking, what you're planning.
Interesting.
It's a great way to get comfortable with the language and to start thinking in English more naturally.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a simple but effective exercise.
Okay.
And another technique they recommended is called shadowing.
Shadowing. What's that?
So basically, you listen to a native English speaker, like from a podcast or a movie.
Right.
And you repeat what they're saying. You try to match their pronunciation, their intonation, their rhythm.
So you're kind of mimicking them.
Yeah, exactly. And this is really good for developing a more natural flow when you speak. It helps you internalize the sounds and the rhythms of the language.
I can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah, and they also suggested something that might feel a little awkward at first.
Okay.
But it's actually super effective.
What's that?
Record yourself speaking.
Oh.
Yeah, I know it sounds weird.
Yeah.
But it's a great way to get objective feedback on your pronunciation.
Oh.
You can hear where you need to improve, and you can track your progress over time.
Makes sense.
And of course, there are all those language learning apps out there, which can be really helpful.
How so?
Well, they offer speaking exercises.
Right.
Some of them even have voice recognition technology.
Oh, wow.
So they can give you feedback on your pronunciation.
That's cool.
And they also connect you with other learners for conversation practice.
So you can practice with real people.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
And you know, another fun way to practice is to watch English TV shows and movies.
Oh, yeah.
You can start with subtitles and then gradually try watching without them.
Right.
It's a great way to immerse yourself in the language.
And to pick up natural expression.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that.
And if you come across a word or a phrase that you're struggling with, don't be afraid to repeat it over and over again until it feels comfortable.
Practice makes perfect, as they say.
Exactly.
And remember, it's okay to make mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you're practicing.
Practice is all about making mistakes and learning from them.
Yeah, that's where the real growth happens. And finally, the podcast really emphasized the importance of community.
Right.
They said joining a language exchange group.
Or an online forum, or a meetup.
Yeah.
It's one of the best ways to improve your speaking skills.
How so?
Well, you get to practice with other learners.
Right.
You get support from people who are going through the same thing, and you get exposed to different accents and speaking styles.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a really valuable experience.
So just to recap,
Yeah.
we talked about practicing consistently, talking to yourself in English, shadowing native speakers, recording yourself for feedback, using language learning apps, watching English TV shows and movies.
Absolutely.
And joining language learning communities.
Those are some great tips.
Yeah, and I think what's so encouraging is that even small actions, if you do them consistently, can lead to big results.
It's all about building those habits. And sticking with it.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
But before we wrap up, I want to just reiterate our main message.
Okay.
Learning to speak English. It's not just about acquiring a new skill. It's about transforming your life. It can open up so many doors for you.
Absolutely.
Professionally, personally. It can boost your confidence. It can expand your horizons. It can connect you with people from all over the world.
It's an incredible journey.
It is. So as you're listening to this right now, what's one small action that you can commit to to start improving your English speaking skills? Maybe it's talking to yourself in English for 5 minutes today. Maybe it's finding a short English video to shadow. Whatever it is, just take that first step.
Exactly.
And remember that every step you take, no matter how small, is a step in the right direction.
It is.
And I think that's a great place to leave it for today.
I think so too.
So until next time, happy learning.
Keep practicing.
And we'll see you on the next deep dive.
Yeah, see you then. Bye.